Du lytter til Fitness MK. Det er programmet for os, der træner. I dag der er vi nået til det 3. afsnit i Alpha Pharma-sagen efter en længere pause. Og i dagens afsnit, der har vi fået fat på detektiven John MacLaughlin, som var med til at brække Alpha Pharma-sagen op over i England. Dagens afsnit det er sponsoreret af Nutritions.dk, som er Danmarks nye webshop inden for salg og kosttilskud til træning. De har været så søde at lave en rabatkode, der hedder FitnessMK10, som giver 10% rabat på alle de produkter, de har, som ikke i forvejen er nedsat. Så her i Fitness MK snakker vi om vores træningsliv og sport og doping og kropskultur og alt muligt. Og vi har jo fulgt Alpha Pharma-sagen, og der har været 2 tidligere afsnit, hvor vi har diskuteret den. For dem, der ikke måtte have været med på de første 2 afsnit, så er Alpha Pharma-sagen altså den verdens største dopingsag, i hvert fald hvad angår dopingenheder og monetær værdi, som der nogensinde er blevet brækket op. Og det er altså med den danske bagmand Jacob Sporon-Fiedler, der er vokset op ude på Amager, og som jo altså har lavet sit dopingimperie, hvor han har haft fabrikker i Indien, og de har sendt dopingstoffer til Europa, der er blevet fordelt i hele Europa. Og har sandsynligvis lavet milliarder af kroner på det, på den ene eller den anden måde. Og jeg lovede tidligere, at da vi begyndte serien, at der ville komme flere interviews. Vi har også haft et interview med en person, der har haft en tilknytning til, hvad kan man kalde det miljø af folk, der handler med steroider. Men han ombestemte sig desværre, og turde ikke, eller vi lavede optagelsen, men han ombestemte sig desværre. Vi var bange for, om det var blevet om det kommer for tæt på, fordi det er jo i sagens natur ulovligt. Men jeg lovede også, at vi ville få fat i detektiven fra England, der var med til at optrævle sagen, nemlig John MacLaughlin. Og ham fik jeg for nogle uger siden igennem på, jeg kan ikke huske, om det var Zoom eller Skype, hvor vi lavede et interview, hvor han fortalte om sine erfaringer med det. Så det er simpelthen det, vi er nået til i dag. Jeg er altså vært Anders Nedergaard, a.k.a. Dr. Muskel, og James han præsenterer sig selv på Zoom-opkaldet lige om lidt. Men altså, han arbejder i National Crime Agency og har været med til at optrævle det her system af dopingdistribution. Til dig, der sidder og lytter med, der kan du selvfølgelig skrive ind til programmet, og det kan man på afn@andersnedergaard.dk eller på programmets Facebook-side, der hedder Fitness MK. I'm sitting here. It's Wednesday afternoon, I think, and I had the luck of getting to talk to you, John. And we've been writing a bit back and forth, and it's been a little difficult to hit each other at the right time. So first of all, thank you very much for taking your time to talk to me and the listeners of Fitness MK.
That's okay. Thank you, Anders, for having me here.
Can you just I've done some previous podcasts on this whole Alpha Pharma and Jacob Sporon-Fiedler, but for the listeners that haven't heard those, can you just present, let them know who you are and what you're doing and have been doing?
Yeah, my name is John MacLaughlin. I'm based in Northern Ireland, Belfast, and I was a former investigator with UK's lead law enforcement agency, the National Crime Agency. And I was the lead investigator on the Alpha Pharma Jacob Sporon-Fiedler case.
Yeah. So you're saying former. Did you stop with the police?
Yeah, just recently I've taken up a new position in sport in Switzerland. So just very recently stopped after a long career in law enforcement.
So you're moving?
Yes, I'm moving to Switzerland.
I'm guessing that's get a bit of a culture gap between Belfast and Switzerland.
You probably couldn't get more of a culture gap. Definitely. But it's an opportunity, and Switzerland looks beautiful, and it's always good to try new things. So yeah, I'm very excited, very privileged to be working in the cycling field and going to Switzerland. Very lucky.
Yeah. So if we're just going to dive headfirst into this, so how did you first get into this? What is the first contact at all with anything in any way related to Alpha Pharma and Jacob Sporon-Fiedler?
That's easy. I was a customs investigator for a long period of time and joined the National Crime Agency as an experienced investigator in August 2014. I think on week 1, a piece of paper landed on my desk to do with a seizure of anabolic steroids, 1 ton.
And is that a lot?
Mail forwarding.
Is that a lot? Is that a big catch in your?
That's a lot. That's a full pallet. So, like, you would ship it on a plane or whatever. A full pallet probably more than that. It would fill half a room. It's a lot. And it arrived at a mail forwarding address in Belfast for onward shipment. And it didn't actually. It was on its way to Belfast. It was seized at Heathrow Airport.
What is the legal status of steroids in Ireland?
Steroids in Northern Ireland and the UK are a Class C drug.
Meaning?
So they're, Class A would be cocaine and heroin. Class B, cannabis, and down to cocaine. So it's a drug. It's classed as a drug. In the south of Ireland, it would be a medicine. But in the UK, it's a drug. So you are allowed to have it, and importation for your own use is probably allowed. But importation is controlled, and it's illegal to import them without the right licensing.
Okay. And what is in Denmark, we had criminally, the penalties associated with it is synchronized in Denmark between steroids and recreational drugs totally. It happened like 4 or 5 years ago, just for the listeners.
Yeah, I'm aware of the new law change in Denmark to do with that. In the UK, very, very rare to find a large-scale prosecution for steroids importation. So,
like previous cases.
Yeah, it's there's been a few at a national level, maybe, or a more local level, but not on this scale. So it comes down to the value of the drug, the size of the drug, and those things for a judge to decide what the sentencing would be or what the punishment would be. And similar to other types of drugs, so it's how much volume, harm, those sorts of things would be considered.
So, what is how widespread is steroid use in Ireland?
Very, very. Like everywhere else, it's widespread. From my experience, I would say a lot of it is to do with gym users, bodybuilders, probably still the prime. But I see a much wider marketplace. Older people, younger people, females, and different sports now coming in as well. I think actually, to a degree, the marketplace must be targeted in some way to increase that marketplace. So years ago, it went from just bodybuilders, but now it's everyday people who use gyms.
Yeah. So do you know that from positive doping tests from anti-doping work, or is that like a feeling of the community, or?
Well, I think it's a feeling in the community when you go to your local gym. The local gym that you pay just £20 a month for now has a needle bin.
Seriously?
Where it didn't have 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And also I've seen a number of customer lists of, from PayPal for websites that sell these things. And it's a real mix of customers, from some sportsmen to just everyday people and the ages, and male and female. So I think it has a multitude
the gyms have needle bins.
Yeah, a lot of some of the local gyms, just like gyms you would find, would have a needle bin. Very strange, but it must be because they're finding needles.
That's pretty. I mean, in Copenhagen, we have something like 3 or 4 gyms that are known as steroid gyms, and where more than 50% of the gym goers are probably users. But even in those, I don't think I've ever heard of a needle bin in any of those. And one of these gyms pretty much had a user rate of perhaps 50 or 80 to 90%. Yeah. That's pretty crazy.
Well, we probably have those gyms in the UK, the sort of muscle gyms, the hardcore sawdust on the floor type gyms. But we also have chain gyms here, and people have even said to me, have you noticed there's now a needle bin at the reception? And these are everyday gyms. So what you have now is, as well, the internet. I think the internet's been a big change in this. These things are readily available, and they're not even very clandestine on the internet. It's quite easy. Just Google search, or Instagram, WhatsApp, all these simple ways to purchase these fairly anonymously.
And Facebook groups.
Yeah.
A lot of Facebook groups. Oh my.
A lot. Everything. It's quite instant. And those purchases would be within that country. So they're very, very unlikely that any action will ever happen because it's internal postage.
I go to gyms in Denmark, and I have a pretty, I think, at least myself, that I have a pretty good feeling of the community in Denmark, and my feeling, and that's purely anecdotal, is that the prevalence of use in Denmark is increasing as well. But I think that the usage pattern is changing a little bit, because people don't want to. A lot of the new people that are using steroids are not using them to become really, really big. They just want to look like someone that trains a lot, but explicitly not like someone that's on gear. And I think that's a new thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think the influences are different. Maybe using steroids because they watch Love Island, or they watch, media type shows where people look buff rather than very fit or very muscly, or maybe look shows where they look younger or more vibrant.
Yeah.
So it's probably a different reasons for taking them.
Yeah. So you got the note about the 1 ton.
Yeah, and got to work on it. And what I sort of heard, contacted customs, and these things come in from time to time, and there's not much you can do about that. I thought, well, I like the sound of that already.
So the customs people told you that they had similar pallets coming in once in a while, or what?
Maybe not that large, but that they were seizing a lot of steroids, and basically they would be seized and destroyed. It's very hard to follow up on everything, and it's maybe down their priorities. But this was a large shipment, so set to work
without notifying the police.
Well, customs can deal with it on their own. They could. They referred it to us because the National Crime Agency, if you like, deal with upstream crime. So that would be crime with an international aspect.
Yeah.
That crimes like that there's the problem's always there, but it's very difficult to reach upstream into other countries and solve the problem.
Yeah.
So that's why I think it was referred to us. That's what the NCA do. We have lots of international liaison officers and that sort of scope to go international and try and solve the problem. So that's why it was referred. And actually, the first thing I did was start looking up the brand, and I found it was that the entire shipment was Alpha Pharma. Yeah. Every type of Alpha Pharma was in that shipment. So I went on the internet and I found some of the articles by Jeppe Brock and Christian Jorgensen from Politiken in Denmark. And still to this day, very good articles and excellent investigative journalism. And I found it a little bit.
What year was it you received this note on the desk?
2000. It was towards the end of 2014.
Okay. Yeah.
So they'd already been out and visited Alpha Pharma and written a bit about Jacob Sporon-Fiedler. So that was my starting point. From there, I started to then look at what else was happening. Identified another seizure of 1 ton in London, and a customs officer had looked into that a bit and found linked 5 more ton of deliveries that had arrived, and that was between 2013 and 15. So I thought, well, there's definitely a London link here. There's something going on.
So how was those previous shipments identified as relating to the first London one you were aware of?
Yeah, all related. Same product, Alpha Pharma.
Yeah.
Same originator. So these 1 ton shipments were coming from Singapore.
Okay. So they broke the seal and watched what was inside of it.
They seized 2 ton between that whole lot. Those four other ton were delivered successfully. They're able to use track through the shipper and find out previous shipments. So already we're looking at a space of we're looking at 6 or 7 ton now. So this is starting to get a bit more serious.
Yeah.
And basically what this showed was that although Alpha Pharma is manufactured in Mumbai, in India, that the shipments weren't originating from Mumbai. The shipments were coming from Singapore into the UK to mail or parcel forwarding agents. Like some of the popular ones are DHL and Parcel Force, and it didn't really matter what the brand was. They just needed the functionality of that to forward these things on.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what would be the approximate trade value in Ireland or London of a ton of steroids?
Probably £1 million.
Okay.
You probably it depends. Steroids it's difficult. We have valued them, but there's a cost for buying a bulk load of steroids at 1 ton, and everybody will make money.
Yeah.
As it goes down the marketplace, the next dealer will sell, 100 kilos at a time, and the next dealer might sell more. So everybody's making money in this as it goes down. So what happened next after that? That's a good question.
I have another question. So how many layers of distribution do you think is between a pallet of or a container of 1 ton of steroids and the end user? How many levels of trade?
That's a difficult one. What we do know is that Jacob Sporon-Fiedler tended to have in Europe, from the evidence we've seen, about 5 large customers. Okay, and what he provided for them was like an end shipping function whereby they could order from him and he would ensure that his products were delivered to their customers. Okay, so that's at the top. You have Sporon-Fiedler manufacturing and sourcing steroids and selling them to 5 large customers for distribution in Europe and some other customers, but the 5 large ones. Below that, those customers will have their own supply chain in many countries in Europe. So for instance, there was stuff going to Ireland and Denmark, and the customer he used had a Lithuanian phone number. So that person was actually handling customers in all around Europe. So that customer in Ireland could have been receiving 200 kilos. So he might have had another 5 customers, and on it would go down to a WhatsApp level where somebody's running a group selling steroids. So very hard to tell how far it goes down, but it's just like a TV manufacturer will sell from China. They will have a distribution hub in Germany. Germany will supply to Europe. Each country will supply throughout their nation. So it's just this supply network. And this investigation was a tale of distribution networks, really, is what we've seen there. Whereby a large supplier offering a drop shipping service. And the beauty of that is that the person who you buy the steroids from doesn't handle them.
Oh, it's clean.
Because they go from manufacturer to customer.
Yeah.
So they can't get caught because they don't hold anything, they don't store anything. And in terms of storage, they're using these third-party shippers to store and distribute. So the risk is low. They're actually outsourcing most of their distribution to legitimate customers.
And therefore companies. The risk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's high profit, low risk.
Nice. Well, I know that if you want to buy a kilo of steroid powder in China, you can get that for a couple of £100. It would be
probably, yeah,
something like that, depending on what steroid it is. So
yeah, and you can make a lot from that,
I think I think the market value would be scaled up by about 100-fold.
Yeah, I would say that, because there's if you buy a vial of steroids and it's £20, there's only a microgram in there, or 5 micrograms, whatever it is in that bottle. So you can start doing the maths when you have a couple of kilos.
Yeah, I think it depends. I think that's 2.5 grams per bottle usually. So yeah, but it around a 50 to 100-fold increase in value. So of course it depends on the cost of having it in bottles and in ampules and all that stuff. But it's it looks on paper much better than dealing with cocaine or cannabis.
Yeah, it does. It's a modern crime. I said, it's often overlooked, but I always look at crime in terms of money and harm. And there is a harm there. People might downplay it, but there is a harm there. It's an addictive drug. It's a danger to public health, and it's not controlled when it should be controlled. And also, it makes one hell of a lot of money. And as an investigator, I follow the money.
Yeah. So what happened next?
So we've identified that there's a network. And what we did was I then went through every steroid seizure in UK history in law enforcement, every record, and identified that basically Alpha Pharma started to come into the UK in about 2009. So that would be back when Jacob Sporon-Fiedler was probably involved with the Body House type forum in Denmark.
I had a user on that back in the day.
Yeah, that was a very early bodybuilding forum or blog or whatever it was back in the old internet days. And he registered a company, Body House DK, I think in Austria. So from memory, we found out his colleague had been arrested.
Okay.
And I would say from the history at this point, he began to look at how he did things and went to India.
Yeah, I actually when I was a kid, I actually trained with the guy who made the Body House forum.
There you go.
That's interesting.
Your name never came up.
No, I haven't done anything like that really.
I believe you.
But interesting. I know that he was pretty much forced to hand off the forum because a Danish-based gang that distributed steroids pretty much blackmailed him or coerced him by force into handing off the Body House forum, so they could use it to sell steroids.
Yeah,
like we know where your daughter and girlfriend lives, kind of stuff.
Yeah, so we see then the first, if you like, I call them distribution hubs. So this is where Sporon-Fiedler uses third-party legitimate services to distribute his steroids. And he seems to have went to the UK. So the first seizure we have is going to a parcel forwarding service in London in about 2009. And after I went through all those, I'm up to about 10 distribution hubs in the UK from 2009 to 2015, where seizures have been made coming into the country of Alpha Pharma or related products.
So what does a distribution hub constitute specifically in this case?
So it might be half a ton of Alpha Pharma products sent from Singapore to the UK, and the address on the parcel won't be the customer. It will be Acme Distribution Limited. Acme Distribution will run a legitimate company whereby they make money by receiving large parcels that have been individually labelled, breaking those parcels up and posting them on for the customer.
Without knowing what's in them?
Well, yes, they can't open the parcels unless they're suspicious, really. That's not their role. Their role is to provide parcel forwarding services for the customer and charge a premium for doing so. So what we found is that the accounts for these parcel forwarding companies had been set up using false names, false documents. Some were linked to Denmark, linked to Copenhagen addresses, names and documents didn't really add up. And a common false name kept appearing, the name Joseph Vanek. Joseph Vanek, we'd say at court, is Jacob Sporon-Fiedler. And we think the Joseph that he used in a lot of his documents is the Josef, is Jacob Sporon-Fiedler for Joseph.
Yeah.
So what we've seen with this Joseph Vanek has been setting up these parcel forwarding hubs throughout the UK over a period of time. And the one common thing was that everything that seemed to be seized by customs going there was either Alpha Pharma or other products from India or other Sporon-Fiedler related products of steroids.
What about the bank accounts used to pay for the services from these companies? Did you have access to that?
Well, some of the early ones, the way these companies work, they're actually a very good industry today. They're very legit. They contact law enforcement if they have suspicion. They still have to run a business. They can't go opening every parcel and check everything. But when you go back to 2009, 2010, that industry was probably less regulated. So what we seen was cash in an envelope sent for payments, and very, very little. Literally, it was somebody arriving in with an envelope or cash being posted. It was probably better than some of their customers that didn't pay at all. So as long as the money came in, they kept going with business.
Yeah.
We have now a person called Joseph Vanek that only seems to import Sporon-Fiedler related products from 2009 to 2015.
Nice.
In the UK. So find Joseph Vanek, that's the next thing. So we started to have a look at Sporon-Fiedler. What was he doing? And we noticed that he was traveling to the UK on a regular basis. Heathrow. And I identified that these were very short stays, very short. So he wasn't going too far.
How did you associate the Joseph Vanek with Jacob Sporon-Fiedler? What was the lead for that?
JSF.
So that's it?
It's better than nothing.
So that's some pretty good guesswork.
Well, sometimes you need a lot of luck, They don't always pay off. This one worked. And then we seen, Sporon-Fiedler was flying to London, which is the UK. So he obviously has business there. But we didn't, there's nobody legally, well, there was just maybe starting at that stage, but nobody from 2009 was legally importing Alpha Pharma products. Alpha Pharma products don't have a European marketing license.
No.
So they can't be sold.
But what was the first lead? No. But what was the first lead that made you think Jacob Sporon-Fiedler from
the travel to London? The travel to London, and I thought, well, okay, I think London's very central to what he does if he travels there a lot. So we, at the NCA, we have lots of links. So I knew a guy in the Metropolitan Police who we used to call Mr. Heathrow. And he basically controlled and liaised with all the comings and goings in Heathrow Airport. So if there was any crime in Heathrow, he knew it. I rang him, told him a problem. I've got this guy. He's coming into Heathrow. What do you think we can do about that? And he actually said, listen, I have to check out a few hotels. And if you know Heathrow Airport, most of the hotels are on one road, Bath Road. It's Heathrow, most of the hotels. He said, I'm on foot. I'll call into all the hotels. I have to check out some other business, but I'll drop the name in. And he eventually found out that Sporon-Fiedler had checked into one of those hotels.
With the Joseph Vanek name?
Just by chance, he just asked. The guy said, yeah, we had somebody with that. And he produced a boarding. He managed to produce, a check-in card from the hotel. And this hotel had the name of a business in the area. And that business had a bodybuilding shop joined on to it. So we started to think, right, well, we're getting somewhere now. We've got his UK associates. So the business that he had the business address he put on, it housed a pharmaceutical logistics company and a bodybuilding shop. Nice. The circle is complete, sometimes luck really paid off and we're very lucky there.
So he signed in with the Joseph Vanek name somewhere, and then you made the connection?
He signed in Jacob Sporon-Fiedler in a hotel, but he used the business address in London.
Yeah.
And that business address was one premise that housed a pharmaceutical logistics company and a bodybuilding shop.
So you're looking for people that had... So you're looking for people that had repeated visits to London?
No, we just looked for Sporon-Fiedler.
But when
he came.
But I don't understand how he got on the radar to begin with. How did the name pop up the very first time?
The articles of Jeppe and Christian from Politico.
Oh, So he had actually made the connection.
Oh yes,
before.
absolutely.
So, okay,
that was the first I'd ever heard of the name.
Yeah, okay, I'm
That
getting it
gave me
now.
a starting point.
Sorry.
So I thought, we have his products coming to London. Now we have him coming to London. This is a lot of tons of product, over a short period of time. London must be very significant.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden we have this Danish gentleman who's meant to be legendary and live in Mumbai, having some very strange association with London and Heathrow Airport. So now we've linked him to a logistics company that deals in pharmaceuticals and a bodybuilding shop. So we have some associates.
Yeah.
We started to look at the business premise, and we identified a gentleman called Nathan Selcon, who was an ex-bodybuilding champion in the UK. And we then identified a further seizure, which brought in an Indian gentleman, originally from India, UK-based Indian native, called Gurjapal Dhillon, who was a strange character, nice man, but he was a garment trader. So that sounds sort of, what's the link? The link is this: he has years of experience of importing stuff from India, and it's just it worked. So now we have a pharmaceutical logistics company, we have a bodybuilding shop, and an importer-exporter who would know lots of businesses that do that around Heathrow Airport, and that's what we identified. After that, and this is the truth, at the time, our NCA office in Belfast, quite low number of staff. I did a bit of surveillance on Sporon-Fiedler on a day he came into the country, and that was actually, we got him coming through Heathrow Airport, and that was the first photograph ever of Sporon-Fiedler. There's no photographs online, nothing.
So you did a stakeout.
And this is true. The NCA stakeout team had, I think, 3 females on it. They were looking for somebody that might look like Thor.
Yeah.
Coming through the airport. And Sporon-Fiedler, probably at that stage, I don't think he'd mind me saying, was probably a bit overweight. His bodybuilding days were a bit behind him.
Yeah.
And he walked right past the whole surveillance team and nobody's seen him. So we went back and checked the passport scan, and we got a photograph of him. So at least that was a start. We now knew what he looked like, which was helpful. But we didn't capture him at the premises that day. He turned out later on we got CCTV. He was there. He just came later in the day.
Okay.
So then we have to think, well, what do we do? So we really went for a bit of a
question. How does it work? Can you flag someone's passport so you get a notification when they get into the car? How does that work? Is that possible?
Well, law enforcement in Europe would be able to identify when people are on flights. When they leave their departure company, when they arrive in, there's a manifest for flights or trains or ferries. There would be a passenger manifest which customs would have access to, to identify travel.
But is it uploaded to like Interpol database in real time or something like that, or do you have to look actively?
There's different systems law enforcement would have. They would have access to manifests that feature their own country.
Okay.
So wouldn't need to go to Interpol or Europol or anything so special as that. At the time, the NCA office in Belfast was quite small. We could have opted to do lots of surveillance and but it's needle in a haystack stuff. So we went for a bit of a bosh, just go for it. So what we did was we tried to wait the next opportunity. He didn't really travel much, and we thought, well, we'll just put the door in at the premise and we'll see what we get, and we'll try and tackle Sporon-Fiedler later. So we planned on the 31st of March 2015 to visit the premises near Heathrow, the business address, and search it and arrest the owner of the bodybuilding shop and the Indian gentleman and a few others. That's a nice couple.
It makes for a good movie.
Yeah. Well, sometimes the simple things are the best. Keep it simple.
I mean, the picture of the Indian garment trader and the bodybuilder pharmaceutical logistics company.
It wasn't Ocean's 11, It's a very strange mix, but just sort of worked too. They were very successful in what they did. So we did that, and what we'd identified was that within that business premise, we reckoned that there was a distribution, a UK distribution going out from there, because they seemed to be, we identified links of products with, how did we do this? We identified 3 other addresses in the UK who'd been linked to seizures, UK seizures of Alpha Pharma and products linked to these premises. And we decided we were going to search those as well. So what we were trying to do was sort of form the link, Alpha Pharma to the UK out to other places in the UK on a large scale. I think the UK hub had distributed, we'd identified nearly 5 ton that they had sent to a number of UK addresses. So that was our plan. We were basically searching, I think all in 10 addresses on the 31st of March, and would see what evidence we got out of that could eventually strengthen our case against Sporon-Fiedler. And what happened was slightly different. That was all planned. There was like 150 officers waiting to go. And I got a phone call at 6 o'clock in the morning on the 29th of March, 2 days before, to say he will be arriving on a flight from Singapore at Heathrow Airport. I thought, right, we'll have that then. So I couldn't get there in time myself, but we got the NCA scrambled a couple of officers, and they went on to the plane and arrested him in his seat on the plane. I think his what he said was, "I'm a little shocked." So he wasn't that shocked because he closed his laptop and activated the encryption on it. So off Jacob Sporon-Fiedler went to Heathrow custody, and at that stage I was on a flight from Belfast over to have a chat with him.
Yeah.
So he was a little shocked, actually, to be fair. It was a bit bizarre, this guy from Belfast arriving with a funny accent. And by chance, my colleague in London who helped interview me was also from Northern Ireland. So it was getting very strange. But so the next stage then was to interview Jacob Sporon-Fiedler on the 29th.
Yeah.
We put it to him, about his product range, and that was for the illegal marketplace, and that he was Joseph Vanek. He basically said that Joseph may have been a customer of his, but you couldn't blame him if he sold stuff legitimately in India and other people shipped it to the UK. That wasn't his fault. As the questions got a bit harder, that turned into no comment eventually in the interviews. But he was good. He was confident. He didn't initially get a solicitor. He later did, and so that went on all day. And he was bedded down overnight at the police station. What happened next was strange. That his solicitor happened to call at the business premise we were about to search the next day, and let them know that Jacob had been arrested and he'd mentioned them, and would they be able to supply an address for him to go to when he was released. This was all captured on CCTV, which we later got from the premises.
Oh, he did it inside the police station.
Sorry?
So the solicitor called from the police station?
The solicitor called on his way to the police station the following morning, called into this business premise that we were going to search the following day, and said, Jacob's been arrested. He says he knows you guys. And they went, oh, that's terrible business. See you later. And what happened on CCTV, the minute he left, they went to a green 40-foot container at the side of their premises, reversed the van up, and started to clear the place out, basically. So we interviewed again, and Jacob was eventually released on the 30th. And then the next day, we go and raid everywhere, basically. And what we found at that business premise was in the 40-foot green container was a very elaborate steroids lab. So the UK guys had been doing their own thing with a lab there, nothing to do with Sporon-Fiedler, just they were manufacturing their own steroids in a container, a shipping container, which is a bit of a surprise. We didn't really know anything about it. The container was fitted out like hospital standard, with air conditioning, alarms, fisheye lenses, everything you could think of in that container.
So they knew
we got a van. Sorry?
They knew what they were doing.
Yeah, they've been doing it for a long time. So in the premises, we also found a van, and in that van, it was full of packaging for a range of steroids, flat pack, not used yet. So basically what they've done is they cleared 4 vans out of the container, left some stuff in it and put the van in a warehouse overnight to move the next morning because they were worried the police would come. But we came early and we got the van and we got some stuff, some containers in the lab. So
were those was that branded, the stuff you confiscated there?
It was branded. I think they called it Phoenix. It was just a local brand. It wouldn't be a worldwide, probably to their own customers in the UK. So they were using their customer base that they sold Alpha Pharma to also sell their own brand of cheaper steroids that they made in the lab. And the packaging in the van, from that, the printer had used some offcuts to divide the packaging. And from that, we were able to go back through the offcuts, the product and the offcut. And after about 5 layers of printing, we found the printer. And the printer gave us orders from that customer. And on that one shipping container, 40-foot shipping container, he had made packaging for products that were valued at £42 million. So that's how profitable that 40-foot container was. That also linked to an earlier lab found by the police in 2009 with the same printer doing the same packaging, and that was a further 10 million.
So how did you get that information from the printer again?
We went to the printer and said, we found that in the boxes with the packaging, there was some offcut from other products. They were actually eyebrow dyes. We went to the eyebrow company and they said, well, we use this printer. That printer said, well, I use another guy to do this. And eventually we found the printer who had made the labels.
Oh, so they had a third party actually make the labels themselves? Yes,
make the labels. He thought they were sports product. He just didn't understand what they were.
Wow, that's fucking retarded.
Yeah. So from his records, he was a very good witness in court. He had all the records, so we were able to tot up. We didn't have to do any calculation of chemicals. We had exactly what was ordered. So we were able to do a really good valuation for that. It was £42 million for that lab.
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
But that's not directly associated with Jacob Sporon-Fiedler.
No, it just so happened it was at the premises that he was linked with.
Yeah.
So in the end, we prosecuted Sporon-Fiedler, the Indian gentleman, Mr. Dillon, and the bodybuilder, Nathan Selcon, who's originally from Wales, lived in London for years. And we did them for the importation. So the case was split. It was originally it was reported as a joint conspiracy by a group of people to produce and import. And it was so big that the Old Bailey judge said we need to split it between 2 trials. So that would be one trial, Sporon-Fiedler, Mr. Selcon, Mr. Dillon for importation, and a second trial featuring Mr. Selcon, the bodybuilder, his business partner, Mr. McGregor, who owned the logistics company, and another person called Mr. Afzal. Mr. Afzal was, we would say, was the chemist in court. He was the person in the lab with we will say the know-how of what to do. So this is the group of people, and it's split between 2 trials with Mr. Selcon, the bodybuilder from England, in both trials. What happened next? Yeah, so Sporon-Fiedler was released originally and allowed to go back. So we couldn't keep him. We didn't have enough evidence to start with about his involvement. We basically had to prove that he was Joseph Vanek and that it wasn't his customer.
So at this time, the trial has not happened yet. You're waiting for the trial.
No, this is in between. So you got to remember the trial happened in 2019.
Oh, it's that trial. Okay. Yep.
And this is 4 years.
Yeah.
So what happened in between, apart from gathering evidence and building the case, the strategy was always to get his computer and his laptop, because if we got that would tell the story. Really, it would save so much work. But the computer was encrypted with a 32-bit encryption. In fact, it was the best encryption known to mankind at that time.
Yeah.
Because we tried. It was in my desk for about 4 years. It's just a paperweight. Now you cannot get into it. But we also got a BlackBerry phone. So that he would refuse to give his passwords. He said it was for privacy reasons. And for business reasons.
Technically true.
Yeah. He privately didn't want to go to jail. But So what we did was we the NCA at that stage couldn't get into that phone, so it went to higher level. It was security services in the UK had that phone for a long time, and eventually they cracked the password on it. So we're back in business now. We've got into his phone, and what that phone became the number one piece of evidence really in that case, whereby it showed that he was involved with all the shipments that we said he was. And what the system was, he basically had two systems. He moved his product from Mumbai to a free port, a free zone in Singapore. Advantage of that, what we believed was, well, if you like.
What does free port mean technically?
Well, a free port is they're thinking about setting up in the UK at the moment. So a free port, and they have them in Dubai. It gives a beneficial business, so it speeds up business. So the port will have, for instance, you can register there. You will get tax benefits in the company or in the country for setting up there. You will get speedier customs. You'll get access to banking. So these things are to make business easier. Free trade zones, we call them. They have them in Dubai and have them in Singapore and probably elsewhere. So he had set up a system whereby his goods moved to a shipper in the free port zone that wasn't registered in his name. So, and this was the name that we seen on the shipping documents, nothing to do with Alpha Pharma. He would then have them packed there for customers. We could see this on his mobile phone. We could see him telling them how to pack the shipments, how to address them, how to send them. From the free port zone, they would then move in two ways. They would go either direct to the UK, like some of the seizures we had, or else what he did as well was he engaged the services of a freight manager who knew exactly what he was doing and what he had to achieve. And in our case, this was a Ukrainian gentleman who basically worked out a system whereby he used Ukrainian associates in Frankfurt. So he would route the shipping through Frankfurt Airport, so from Singapore to Frankfurt. That would pass through Finland as well on a hub where it can't really be stopped. It's just traveling through there, his free travel. It can be inspected but not seized. It would then go to Frankfurt Airport. And what was happening was that those loads would be addressed for an address in the Ukraine, as if they were going to the Ukraine. But his friends in Frankfurt would remove them from the warehouse, and they would then be transported in another air shipment to the UK. So they're being diverted from where they were meant to go. So steroids aren't illegal in the Ukraine. So you can see they were saying, well, they're not legal in India, so they're just being shipped. But they would remove them and ship them to a new marketplace into Europe, which they could never go to. So that was the two methods, either direct into the UK, just straight in, or else they got clever. And part of the reason for that is that shipments internally in Europe, very rarely will they get stopped because they've already went through a customs control or should have done before they left Germany or Denmark or wherever. So that is the whole aim of this. It's to get the shipments somewhere into Europe, into a distribution hub where they can ship them on through Europe. Once they've achieved that initial difficult movement from outside Europe into Europe, things get a lot easier for them then. There's a lot more success that these goods will end up where they're meant to be. Yeah. So that was the two methods really that we seen in the distribution model. This Ukrainian agent would then, he moved them himself to distribution zone and sent Sporon-Fiedler the dockets for his customers. Or else eventually he just sent them into Sporon-Fiedler's distribution hubs in the UK. Sporon-Fiedler handled that. And what we seen in the customer base was the people who received it were desperate to have the tracking numbers, because their customers want to know where their stuff was. So oddly enough, there's this constant demand. And that was his biggest problem, keeping up with demand. He couldn't supply stuff. He couldn't supply enough of it, and he couldn't supply it fast enough. He told the Ukrainian shipper, it actually featured in some of the press articles, I need to do 4 tons per month to Europe. So that's what the marketplace is. I would say he could do more if he could handle the logistics. Yeah. And he possibly doesn't want to overexpose himself either. So that's what we worked out. We basically worked out the system and we were able to evidence it. And key to that was the phone. We literally had the WhatsApp messages that showed he was Joseph Vanek, and that he shipped these goods and it wasn't somebody else, and that all the company names that he used, he was in control of. They're all false, but he controlled them. And really, this was a movement from Alpha Pharma India to Europe, which is illegal.
Yeah.
So that's where we got to. So we brought him back. He came back once on bail, and then we played a clever game. In the UK, you have to disclose to people before an interview. Well, you should disclose what the interview is about, and really the topics you're going to cover.
Like criminal interrogation, or
yes, criminal. So it would be good procedure and good manners. If you want a good interview, you would give them a bit. We want to question you about this. So we sort of invited him back once we had the phone evidence, and told him very broadly what we'd be speaking to him about. And we mentioned we'd be speaking to him about his devices and his passcodes, the ones he'd failed to give. So what we actually meant was, we're going to put to you about 3 hours of telephone evidence, but we didn't want to tell him that because we were really worried he wouldn't come back from India for interview. Well, if he knew we were into his phone, at that stage he was probably pretty confident after a few years they're not there.
Yeah.
So he arrived at the police station with his solicitor.
So you played a gamble.
And then we give further disclosure with the information that we're going to question you about your phone and your relationship to these and that. And I think the interview lasted 3.5 hours of questions. No commented to everything, but he knew he was in trouble.
Yeah.
And I think he still thought he would be released to go home to India. But unfortunately, on his phone, we produced evidence that he had been researching relocation to Guatemala, South America, and how to buy citizenship and passports abroad. So for us, that was great evidence to put to the custody sergeant to say, listen, this guy's a flight risk. We think with the amount of money involved and his contacts in the criminal world, the international aspect of it, his use of passcodes, his use of that this guy will disappear, and he has the means to do so. So the custody sergeant agreed, and he was remanded in custody overnight. In fact, his solicitor was so confident he would go back to India, the solicitor had went home and had to come back to the police station. So he ended up in... He went... Where did he go there? Yeah, he was remanded, and the judge basically asked him to surrender his passports, and he had to stay at a hotel in London. What we found out a short while later was that he hadn't surrendered all his passports.
More passports.
He had another passport. So I think he had multiple passports for visa reasons. So like if you travel to, say, Palestine and you want to go to Israel, you don't want to show the stamps. So you can have 2 passports, a short passport and a long passport. It's legitimate. But he hadn't surrendered one of them, and we found it out. So we when he went to sign for bail at the police station, we arrested him again. In his pocket, he had I think he had 10,000 euros, and we think he was going. He was on his way. He'd had a party the night before. He was a bit hungover, and we think he was going to go. So it was a good move. We brought him back before the judge, who wasn't very happy that he hadn't surrendered his passport.
Oh.
So he put him back in jail again, and we got the passport back, and the Old Bailey judge increased his bail to £800,000, which we think is one of the largest bails in the UK ever.
Okay.
So he had to come up with 800,000 money, not even a surety. He had to produce the money, which he said he didn't have, but it was produced. So it's still, we think it's one of the Barclays bank scandal in England. It was probably similar, but we couldn't really find a higher bail amount. So it was quite significant. The judge took it very seriously because of the value of his crimes. So he was then released again, and he stayed in London then until trial. So yeah, eventually we were then on the path towards court. So we've done the investigation, then it's sort of preparing for court as the next stage.
Yeah. So I don't know what kind of means like criminal investigators have, but was it considered trying to put a computer like hacking his new computer?
No, we had the evidence then. How much evidence do you need? How much steroids? The value of this case at the moment, at the start of the investigation, now it was whittled down a bit by some arguments and legal arguments, but we were looking at shipments in this investigation, not necessarily all related to Sporon-Fiedler.
No.
In the value of 80 million, 100 million. So, what we don't need more evidence. It's the last thing we want. It can actually hinder you because the case becomes so complicated.
Yeah.
You only need the threshold in terms of the severity of the crime for Class C drugs is 250 kilos. Once you go above that, it doesn't get any more severe. We were sitting at, maybe 80 ton, 100 ton initially, which is whittled down. So, we just focused on what we had. We had enough. This was actually went down to a smuggling case, quite a simple smuggling case, but complicated in terms of its range, number of years, size, how long it went on, and the complexities lay within the methods they'd used and their ability to put evidence in faraway places. In the end, we ended up with 26. We would use a thing called an ILOR. An ILOR is a request to another jurisdiction for evidence. And we had 26 countries. We had ILORs. It was quite remarkable for this case. And we think 35 police agencies involved to pull together all the evidence, which was all over the world. And we had the financial evidence as well. On his phone, there was evidence that Jacob Sporon-Fiedler had a financial controller in Singapore, and the figures were frightening. It was millions going through that. So we also had a money trail to try and prove, because although we didn't have to prove money laundering, we do have to, if we say this crime is worth X amount, we need to show some evidence of where that money is, if it's so obvious. So his phone did have a lot of financial transactions, which did not seem to be simple banking transactions. They were routing money through money bureaus and strange accounts in Singapore and Hong Kong. We also actually managed to we managed to get assistance from the Seychelles Authority, which is quite unusual. And we showed that he had a series of accounts in the Seychelles through which money is going through. So, it's just the complexity. The complexity in the case lay in the range of the case and the length of years and the number of seizures and the number of products and expert witness statements about the valuation. So that was really what a lot of our work was being put into. The evidence was sound. It was very good evidence, and that proved his case at the first appearance of Mr. Sporon-Fiedler at court. Actually, on the way into the court, he had grown a beard. And he's quite a nice guy. He's always very civil to me, very nice. With first name terms, as most of the people in the case were. Oddly enough, these guys weren't big nasty people. They were quite personable. They still did what they did, but they were nice. And he said to me, "Yeah, I've grown a beard. They don't have razors in prison." I thought that was strange. But he then pleaded guilty on the first opportunity, and we'll put that down to the strength of the evidence. The evidence was very, very strong. So we'd played a good game. And to be fair, I think he did himself a lot of favours, because the benefit of that is that once it goes to sentencing, he will get good. It's in UK, it's set out the time frame. So if you plead guilty on your first day in court, you get maximum benefit in terms of sentencing. Okay. So you could get a lot off your sentence, which he did in the end. But that's because he did the right things. He saved us a long drawn out court case. He pleaded guilty. He did the right thing. Others in the case didn't, and they suffered. They got higher sentences than him.
What would the prospects have been had he for his punishment had he not claimed guilty?
I think the judge, in her summing up, started, and this is from memory, started with 8 to 10 years as a maximum, and then started to give him his benefit and categorise the severity of the crime. And he then went down to, it was 3.5. So, it could have been 8 to 10 years. This is a very large amount of drugs and a very large amount of money. And, I think I've always said he's very clever. I think that was a very brave decision from his. It's hard to admit, I'm going to jail. I'll go to jail. It's very hard, but he's a clever guy. And Some other people took their chances and it didn't work out for them. They got 5 years and they maybe weren't as far up the chain as him.
But the money's still gone, right?
No, we have in all our case, in all the NCA's cases, we have a process called confiscation. So that's still ongoing. There will be further court hearings. So we will work out a benefit figure for the crime. I think Sporon-Fiedler is somewhere between 10 and 20 million. Can't remember exactly. And we will look at what assets he's got. So there'll be a process whereby we'll ask him to identify his assets and where they are. And that will go on for a long time. And eventually we'll hit him with, hopefully, once we've worked it out, with what he can pay or what we want him to pay. And that can have default sentences. You know, it can be big sentences, 1 million or 2 million. If you don't pay it, you can go back to jail for 8 to 10 years.
Is that a new punishment or an extension of the ongoing?
As long as he's in the UK, it's a separate matter, really. So you have your prosecution and custody for the offence. But then you have a separate thing whereby we'll say, right, okay, you valued to the tune of £10 million or X million. We want that money back. And we think you can give us it back because you have assets here or there, or we think you've lied about assets or whatever we come up with. And there'll be a court argument about that. But at the end, the judge will decide what Sporon-Fiedler should pay back, and the other people involved as well. If it's anything, or if it's 1 million, 2 million, 10 million, they'll make a decision on that, and we'll respect that decision, and they have to pay it back. So, and if you don't pay it back, it's a serious matter.
But if he has moved 40 tons of steroids into Europe a year for God knows how many years, that's billions, probably.
It's a lot of money. Now, everybody in that chain will makes a bit of money, but he's the main man. He's making them, you know. So the value, there is a value associated with the crime. I can't remember exactly what it is. It's somewhere. It's above 10 million, I think, for his that we agreed on for his
pounds or
his
euros.
Value pounds. So again, you know, figures. We could have went on figures in this case all day. It was so substantial. Even the small figures are substantial. So that's ongoing at the moment, and that'll be dealt with through the courts, whereby they will work out a benefit figure, and the judge will order what he has to pay back.
So but the sentence he received, that was in 19, and it was 2.5 years, right?
Yeah, it's about 2.5 years. I can't actually remember. It's 2.5 or 3 years. I think he got in jail. Yeah, and he's in jail at the moment.
Yeah. So in some when is that going to happen?
It's ongoing at the moment. It's ongoing at the moment. It begins after the criminal case. So there must be a prosecution first, and then they start the process of looking at benefit. And then they will look at how much he's benefited from that crime, and a judge will make a decision about how much he needs to pay back, if any.
It's interesting. In Copenhagen, we had, in Denmark, there was an IT company called Cyber City that made a VAT carousel business with software licenses that crashed at a worth of, billions actually. And it was founded by a guy that also grew up in the fitness community and was selling steroids in the 90s and early zeros. And I can't help but think if those guys ever met up.
It's the same mindset, you know. Yeah, it's the same mindset.
I can't help. He was called Steinbacher, this guy, and Steinbacher. He has been. I mean, a lot of guys from the community in the gyms in Copenhagen have said that he pretty much made his first money driving a truck around the gyms and selling steroids in the 90s, and probably
state money. Yeah. I did a lot of carousel fraud when I worked in customs.
Okay.
Difficult. You know, it's multi-country, and loads of invoices, paperwork. They're difficult cases to prosecute.
You talked about the 5 distributor hubs in Europe. Is that also information that was recovered from the BlackBerry phone?
Yeah. We don't. Well, the UK one was mostly the people that were arrested with him. That was the one hub. So it's a very big marketplace. There was also. So I'll go with the phone numbers. There's a Spanish phone number. There was a Greek phone number. There was a Lithuanian phone number. And there was another customer, Austrian, Germany based. Okay. So they there was some other customers, but by and large, those 5 customers were the bulk of his work. So he tended to keep it at that level. I would suspect if somebody from, for instance, the Lithuanian guy seemed to be linked to a lot of shipments to Denmark.
Okay.
But it may be just a system he has whereby if somebody from Denmark contacts him, he puts him in touch with somebody else, so he's out of the loop.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, he'll still sell the steroids, so it makes no difference to him.
So what do we know about those other 4 guys or distributors?
Not too much. So what we would do in that case is we would forward that information to those jurisdictions and let them choose what they do with them. There's only so much we can do about foreign phone numbers and stuff, you know. So,
yeah.
And I'll be really honest, we had enough to do. This case was big. There was a lot. The prosecution file was enormous, and part of our problem was trying to take something that's very complex and make it simple enough for the jury in court to understand and to present it in a nice, punchy manner. If we start pulling in other people from other countries, it just gets a bit messy. So we just left them as customers in the number. It's really outside of our jurisdiction.
But do you know what has happened to them? Like not as a cop, but as a regular person?
No, I do not know. What I do know is that the information was forwarded to those jurisdictions, and really it's over to them. I was too busy.
Yeah.
I had too much to do. So, but they were considered. He had a nice system, you know. He kept the circle of trust small, and if anybody sort of reached in, so he had some stuff that we'd see on his phone. He might receive the Alpha Pharma website. I think you could contact. There was a contact form that seemed to go to his phone, and on his phone it was able to identify where the IP address was from. On that, it's quite cool. It was able to say where that person was actually sending the email from. So it may have differed. He was probably just a bit cautious with law enforcement, what have you. And he seemed to almost, I would say, refer those on to his customers. So he still could deal with a smaller number of larger customers, very trusted customers.
Yeah. So do you have any sense or idea of if those distribution hubs were they pawns to him, or were they co-conspirators? Do you think that he?
I think it's like the customer who becomes a client. So they would have started off as large customers, and as probably their buying power and their supply needs increased, they became more trusted to him. So, sorry, give me a second.
That's fine.
They became more trusted to him. So he would then, we noticed this sort of pattern where he would eventually go and meet them.
Okay.
And the relationship would improve, and they would probably get better terms. We've seen a lot of ones where they were arranging to meet him to hand over cash or to send cash in parcels. To address, there was one time I think on the phone he was concerned because I think it was £100,000 or £200,000 had been sent somewhere, and the parcel had broken open, and it was okay; it survived. Another time I think he'd lost
cash.
Yeah, 200,000 in a brown envelope, basically. Another time he had lost a suitcase on a trip to somewhere, and I think there was a large amount, like 80,000 or something, in the suitcase, and he was joking about it, and eventually it turned up. There's a lot of money. The Singapore financial controller at one stage arranged for a collection from, and this was all on his BlackBerry, from his office in Mumbai, whereby he collected suitcases of cash and eventually transferred that into bank accounts. It was $250,000 in one day. He picked up in suitcases.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of money. And, our prosecution was to do with the UK side of things, and really Europe. There's other marketplaces for Alpha Pharma as well.
Yeah.
Beyond Europe. So, but I think Europe definitely is most lucrative marketplace. Shied away from America. We didn't really see any evidence of any involvement in America. There is evidence that he was quite cautious that he didn't deal with anything to do with America. Probably because of the kingpin laws in America and the prosecution. One of the first guys prosecuted there was steroids.
What?
A steroid importer was prosecuted under the Kingpin Act. One of the first people ever.
Okay.
I think he eventually fought it. He hid out in Austria, and the Americans lost the extradition battle.
Okay.
So I think he was, from that point on, he was quite keen not to do any business in America.
Yeah, one could wonder why he didn't do anything in South America, because those guys have a very, let's say, liberal attitude towards steroids.
Well, I think if you look at the steroid marketplace, they're more... the marketplace is greater where the regulations are greatest.
Yeah.
So if you choose somewhere like South America with a lax attitude to steroids, they can probably get their own steroids there. They're probably home manufactured. There's not a problem. And the more illegal they are, increases the marketplace.
Of course.
The best marketplace for steroids would be Europe, America, and onwards, because that's where the regulations are high. In the countries where the regulations are low, there's not a great marketplace because people can walk and buy them over the counter. So that's what he's looking at, the European, and that's because of European, the EU has good drug regulations and good laws to protect its people. So that creates a marketplace for illegal drugs.
Yeah, because demand isn't changing.
Exactly.
The guys from the British hub, were those known for any criminal activity before this?
No, they had no real criminal past. I think Mr. Selcon was a bodybuilder. That was his background, who seemed to have a bodybuilding shop, which he seemed to think was quite successful. I don't know if that was the true source of his wealth, but the other guy, Mr. McGregor, was prosecuted as part of the lab. He was a businessman in import-export, logistics, printing, that sort of background. No criminal past. Mr. Dillon was a garment trader. As I say, all nice, very friendly people, family people. No, there was nothing nasty about them, nothing to worry about them. They were dead on. They were nice guys.
So I've known quite a few people that have dealt steroids at some point in their life, and there seems to be some overlap always with organized crime. And I'm guessing the same would be the case in Ireland or in London or wherever.
Yeah, it's profitable. Organized crime goes for profit in illegal substances.
So my question is, how far down the distribution chain do you have to go before this becomes the case, do you think?
I think it probably varies country to country, but you're probably down at a more local level.
Yeah.
I think it's a more local level.
So it's the last, the lowest or the second two lowest levels of distribution or something like that?
Potentially, because you're probably down to some local criminal aspect who maybe sells steroids along with selling other things. As you go up the chain, if you take Sporon-Fiedler at the top, he only does steroids. He sells steroids. That's his thing. As it goes down the chain, you probably will naturally, as it gets near the bottom, move away from that, where people are buying a product, that they probably sell along with some other products, like the corner store. The corner store doesn't just sell Coca-Cola; it sells lots of things. So as you go down that chain, you have Coca-Cola, for an example, distributed nationally, internationally, going down, and eventually it ends up into a shop that sells other things. So I think, I've no doubt at all that at a local level, you're getting down into the dirt there, if you like.
That's interesting.
In terms of Sporon-Fiedler, what we did see, not that it was the criminal methodology is what we see. Yeah. So this is a case about steroids, but the methods used in terms of shipments and everything else are very high end, and money laundering and very high end that you would see in other crimes with other drugs, cocaine, heroin. You're getting into those. They're tapping into those networks whereby they need to launder money. They need people who will move stuff. So they're maybe tapping into those networks without actually being like that themselves.
Yeah. So, I mean, all the money that are coming into a distribution network like that are pretty much all kind of illegal from the point that they're given to the dealer, and then they're moving upwards in the system.
Yeah, not particularly on this case. We kept the criminal prosecution at a fairly high level, but in terms of steroids, what we do know is, from my experience, what we sort of see is a movement of money that would go from So the local person's paying somebody direct for actually handing them the drugs. A web customer would be paying them by PayPal or some method like that, whereby it would go into their accounts. Moving up the chain a bit, you're into a local dealer who then ends up with maybe £5,000 cash a week or more.
Yeah.
He's then popping that into an envelope and sending it to the likes of this London distribution network, probably, that sort of level.
Yeah.
And they're then supplying him with products. What we did notice now was that the products, so Sporon-Fiedler would have sent the distribution hub, which is a legitimate business, emails, and he would say, right, I'm Joseph Vanek. You will be receiving 1 ton on a pallet. It will contain 12 parcels. I want parcel, they'll be marked #1, #2, #3, #4. I want #1 to go to Denmark, and he'll give an address. I want parcels 3, 4, and 5 to go to Ireland. I want parcel 6 to go there. So that's the sort of the way it works. What he did was he would distribute. These distribution hubs don't store product. You have to keep moving it. They don't do storage. It's not a role they make money on.
Okay.
They want to move them. So when he has those trusted customers, he knows he can always move the stuff because he can send stuff on and get paid for it later. There's not that sort of rush there. There's big money flow. So at the lower end of thing, there would be people wanting to be paid instantly. So you're at that the gym user, the internet user, moving up to a local guy, maybe sending just regular shipments or regular amounts of $5,000 a week and being supplied with whatever they have. And that was another thing we noticed. The dealers tend to get whatever was in stock. Yeah. Yes, they might want Alpha Pharma, but there mightn't be any. So, but I do have 4 boxes of some other stuff here, and they took it. And no matter what it seemed to be, they were able to promote it as the next best thing. You see that in a lot of the forums. They can use the forum. We think the forums are manipulated a lot to make things sound like they're good when there's probably not a lot of difference in some of the stuff they're taking.
No. But actually, what I was going towards is so he was pretty much laundering the money at the top level of the organization, and I can't help but think, why didn't they try to launder the money at a lower level of the organization so he wouldn't be the one taking a fall for economic criminality as well? I mean, because if you're going to do the kingpin shit,
it's his money.
Yeah.
He wants that money. That's the end game. But he wants that money in his account.
But they could have made the money legal at the level of the local distributors if he helped them launder it or something like that.
I don't think he would get his hands dirty at that level. Okay. He has a system in place with somebody who's very good at taking that illegal side of the business and channeling the money to him. So why would he even get involved? As long as the money goes to his system. Yeah. That's the thing, Just on the products there, we did test his products. Actually, we got a lot of high end testing done. The products, in terms of the content, they were found to be to contain the active ingredient, potentially a little bit stronger, which is potentially quite dangerous on some products. They were classed as sort of pretty good, but now that test was only on the active ingredient. It didn't test for impurities or anything else. And another big thing we noticed was that concerned probably more than the active ingredient. And this is where maybe the forums let themselves down when they do tests on these products. There was no refrigerated storage. There was nothing. These things just were put in a box and sent all around the place and lay in a warehouse, in a room, and whatever. So on most of the labels, I'm sure for most medical things, there's controlled storage, and that wasn't happening. So even if a forum tests the products and find that it does contain testosterone or whatever, doesn't mean that product's safe.
No. How big a fraction of the steroid being used in Ireland or Greater Britain do you think was comprised? How big a fraction of those products were Alpha Pharma? Do you have any idea of that?
That's a difficult. Alpha Pharma, I always class as a high end. I always say that I do a little presentation sometimes. I say Alpha Pharma's Coca-Cola. You have most other stuff in the middle would be maybe Pepsi or Fanta, and then you have Roller Cola at the bottom, which is probably all made in a lab somewhere in your own country. So I think it's similar to that market. There's a marketplace for everything. The marketplace for Alpha Pharma will be smaller because it's considered high-end, high value. So in the middle, you probably have quite affordable stuff, which would be stuff that comes from probably India, a lot of stuff from India or Eastern Europe. And then at the bottom end, you have local lab produced, white label type stuff that you're not really sure where it's been made. So it's probably similar to anywhere else about that share of the marketplace. It's done, and that's why the countries they target, people have money. South America, probably poor population in certain places, and Eastern Europe, you're moving into. They target Europe because we have disposable income. So there's something out there for everybody. Alpha Pharma, I don't know, top 20% maybe.
I talked to a couple of Danish dealers that estimated the fraction in Denmark at, I think they said upside of 40-50% in Denmark.
Denmark would be different because you have that legend with it, and that goes with Alpha Pharma. In Denmark, you have Sporon-Fiedler, you have this big story, and it's a sort of home brand, and it is pumped out as being good stuff on the forums. I don't take steroids. I don't know what good stuff means.
I know that
everybody recommends everything on a forum. Everybody has something good or bad to say about everything. So, but I think that's probably in Denmark and Scandinavia, it's probably a little bit higher because it's more like, it's more like your home steroid there.
Yeah. At least I know. I mean, I don't know how it is nowadays, but back in the days, it was pretty most likely one of the most faked steroids, of counterfeited steroids, steroid brands.
Yeah, he put a lot of work into that. We could see that he was operating a batch code checking system on his website and stuff, and packaging. So he was concerned, but I think he's still. His problem was he couldn't supply enough. It wasn't that he wasn't able. He had supplies sitting in a warehouse he couldn't get rid of. It probably didn't matter hugely to him. Everything's counterfeited at the end of the day. That's just it. No.
Yeah. So, what do you? You speak pretty almost fondly of Jacob Sporon-Fiedler. How much have you talked to him?
I've spent many hours talking to him at interview and in court. Fondly, I don't really know the guy. What I will say, I'm quite a people person, and he was always very pleasant to me and very mannerly. I can imagine if you were in business with him, you could have a good relationship with him. I don't know. I don't know if I wouldn't say I respect him that much. At the end of the day, he's a criminal. And in terms of business, it's easy to sell stuff that has hundreds of % profit. You can make mistakes along the way. I would have more respect for a businessman that only got 5% profit and was successful and was honest. Yeah. So I think when you're trying to investigate somebody for so long and prosecute somebody, there's maybe a bit of respect there for him because it took a lot of my time and effort and skills and luck to put him in jail. It was really difficult. It wasn't easy. It took a lot of hours. So I think there's a bit of respect there, but still a crook.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're about there.
Okay.
Unless we've forgotten something. I know that I did a previous podcast with Jeppe, as you know, and he did. He's been looking into both the stuff before your work and a little of the stuff afterwards. As far as I can tell, no one has come from the leads to the other distribution hubs so far.
Yeah, I doubt it. Listen, the demand's out there. The demand for Alpha Pharma will continue on. He's out of action, but that demand will still be there, and I've no doubt if it's not him, it's somebody else will fill that gap. That's just the way of the world. That's just the way it goes. Yeah. So somebody else can go after whoever it is. Yeah.
I mean, the dealers I've talked to have also said that in Denmark, the fraction of steroids that are being dealt in Denmark that are Alpha Pharma has decreased substantially, but a lot of new brands are pushing into the market. So there's
demand there. Demand will always be filled with supply. I'm sure I've been at the very least a hindrance to him, maybe a bit more than that. He's a couple of years in jail to consider what he's going to do. But that's just it.
On a slightly more personal level, do you think it actually helps that it's illegal?
Never considered it, really. I just do my job. My job is that those are illegal, and it's a high-value crime. Do you know what? I don't really get into it. I just do my job. That's all I do, and my job is to fight crime. And if it's illegal, it's illegal. It's for the powers that be. It's like people say to me about a sentence. Were you happy with a sentence? That's not my job. We had a very good judge in court who considered all the facts and delivered the sentence. My job is to put him into the court and to present the best evidence. Judgments on whether products are legal or not, way beyond me. For a bigger mind than mine. I just like chasing bad guys.
Nice. And now you're going to doing it in cycling.
Hopefully I can do a bit of work. Very, very lucky to be working with the CIDF in Switzerland. And I'm really looking forward to a new challenge. I have a lot to learn, I think.
Yeah. I think I don't have any more questions. Actually, I think you came around all the bits and pieces that I could think of. So I don't have anything more.
That's okay. I did try to listen to the Jeppe and Christian podcast. They went and done it all in Denmark, Danish.
Yeah. We kind
what a surprise!
Yeah, but Jeppe is a nice guy.
He's a great guy, and I don't know if I think they already are award-winning journalists, but I think they should get another one for that, because I must admit that they weren't far off the mark from the start right through. I went and met the guys, and I talked to them about their visit to India and stuff, and they were always very helpful. But they came over when we had the press conference for the sentencing, and I hope he was quite proud of himself, because he should be. I was very impressed. As a criminal investigator with an awful lot more tools than Jeppe would probably have, I was very impressed with his and Christian's work. They were very, very good.
So it could have taken quite a lot longer without the connection between the Josef Warnack and the name connection.
Yeah, without a doubt. That's your starter for 10, as they say. Once you get that starter, you're off and running. Those things, like I say, you just need. It can be the smallest piece of evidence, can be the most significant.
Yeah,
and that was a great starter for me. And I referred to their articles many times over the years just to go back and have a look, and I couldn't prove them wrong.
So I never asked Jeppe if any of those are out in English. Do you know if any of them was published in English?
I have friends at Anti-Doping Denmark. Melina, do you know Melina?
Yeah.
Melina sent me the articles and wrote some notes on it for the important in English, translated a bit. So it's good. Got a good relationship in Copenhagen. A great relationship with the Copenhagen police. Too many to mention probably, but a number of visits over there. They're very supportive, and also Anti-Doping Denmark, which were a great initial link. They'd heard through Anti-Doping UK, Anti-Doping, that I was doing a bit of work on Alpha Pharma, and they reached out and made a few connections with Copenhagen police, and that helped a lot, really. A lot of work, because he's a Danish citizen, had things to do over there. And I think what the NCA and the UK do very well is they're quite keen on new initiatives. They reach out. They're not afraid to have new partnerships with business, with anti-doping organizations, and it's refreshing. When I worked for customs, and everything was quite secret, but for this case, it was a real collaboration from some very strange areas, expert witnesses from the anti-doping world, and even we spent a lot of time gathering evidence of why is this crime such a problem. So we had a lot of people from the pharmaceutical industry who provided statements about the lengths they go to stop counterfeit medicines. We had the anti-doping world about what damage it does to sport, damage it does to health. So we had a lot of input from very strange places. And this was all presented in evidence in court to form, if you like, we set out our stall early about why this was a problem. We heard from the experts to make sure that this wasn't a victimless crime, that there were victims in this crime, and it mightn't be just the steroid users that you think of. It's industry, it's health, it's government, it's licensing, it's everything else. So it was a very unusual case, brilliantly put together, I may say.
Well, thank you very much for your time. I enjoyed talking to you tremendously, and I'm looking forward to the next chapter of whatever happens.
I hope so, Anders. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I hope you can understand what I've said with my lovely Belfast accent.
I love it. I'm a great fan of accents. Do you have like a Twitter or something where you talk about your work, or do you want any plugs for that?
I like the shadows. I don't like talking about my work too much. So this is nice because I've sort of closed that chapter and it's been through court. So I'm only talking about what's been out there already. But no, long lives the grey man.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your time, certainly. And can you just give us your name and your title for the listeners again?
Yeah, I'm John MacLaughlin, former NCA investigator, now working with the CADF in Switzerland in cycling anti-doping.
Thank you very much for talking to us.
It's okay, Anders. I'll get you a pint of Guinness next time I see you.
And of course, if you come by Copenhagen, you're very welcome to come by for. I think that would be a Carlsberg then, or it's a terribly boring beer. These days, everyone are drinking.
Tuborg.
Well, I'm trying to reinstate the Bloody Mary because in that you're getting the vegetables and the alcohol at the same time, and that works.
Brilliant, Anders. I think you've just offered me 3 drinks.
Yeah, talk to you. Have a nice day.
Cheers, Anders. All the best.
Bye.
Bye.
Det var dagens afsnit af Fitness MK. I hørte James MacLaughlin fra NCA fortælle om sit eventyr, hvis man kan kalde det, med Alpha Pharma. Og dagens afsnit, det var præsenteret i samarbejde med nutritions.dk, som er Danmarks nye webshop inden for salg af kosttilskud til sport og træning. Og de har altså som sagt lavet en rabatkode, der hedder FitnessMK10, som giver 10% rabat på alle de produkter, de har, som ikke i forvejen er nedsat. De er altså med til at betale for, at du kan høre Fitness MK lige nu. Så hvis du lige vil skudde op noget, så kan du gøre det hos dem. Du har lyttet til Fitness MK. Jeg hedder Anders Nedergaard, og du kan lytte med til det. Du kan lytte til dette og de andre afsnit, vi har lavet af Fitness MK, og det kan man gøre på stream og podcast. Man kan streame det inden fra andersnedergaard.dk, eller man kan gøre det fra Spreaker, og man kan podcasten fra alle de store podcasttjenester, inklusive Podimo. Programmet er produceret af Jonas Pedersen, og I skal være velkommen til at skrive ind til os, og det kan man på afn@andersnedergaard.dk eller på programmets Facebook-side. Jeg gør alt, hvad jeg kan for at svare på det hele. Det kan godt være, at det nogle gange er langsomt, men jeg tror, jeg når det hele. Kan I have det godt derude.